The applause hit like a wall. Every hand in that ballroom was clapping. Every face was glowing. And Selim Varelli stood in the middle of it all, completely still. His champagne glass hadn't moved in 40 seconds. The crystal stem pressed cold against his fingers. He didn't feel it. He couldn't feel anything past the ringing in his ears and the slow collapse happening somewhere behind his ribs. Driven Wolf, alpha boss of the Iron Crescent Pack, the most feared man in the Pacific Northwest, was standing at the front of that stage, smiling, one arm wrapped around a golden-haired Omega named Soren Vale. "My future mate," Driven said. The crowd erupted again. Selim's lungs forgot how to work. 21 years. He had given that man 21 years. Not as a servant, not as staff, as the person who stayed when everyone else ran. The person who patched wounds at 3 in the morning, who rewrote strategy documents during pack wars, who sat beside Driven through grief so heavy it had bent both of them sideways. And he never asked for a title. He never needed one, because he assumed the bond was already there. That was his mistake. Hi viewers, have you ever stayed loyal to someone for years, only for them to choose a complete stranger right in front of you? Drop your experience in the comments. The clapping continued. Soren laughed at something Driven whispered in his ear. Selim set his glass down on a nearby table. Quietly, carefully, like a man who understood that if he moved too fast, something inside him would break past the point of repair. He turned toward the exit. Nobody watched him leave. Nobody except one person. An elderly pack elder named Aldous Crew stood near the far wall, completely still in a room full of celebration. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was staring directly at Selim, not with pity, with fear. Selim pushed through the exit doors and let the cold night air hit his face. Behind him, faint and low, he heard Aldous Crew murmur something to the elder beside him. He has no idea who he really is. The first time Selim ever protected Driven, they were both 9 years old. 3 older boys had cornered Driven behind the pack training yard, called him soft, said his father's empire would collapse the moment real wolves tested it. Selim walked through that circle like it wasn't there. He didn't throw a punch. He just stood between Driven and every single one of them, arms loose at his sides, eyes calm and direct. "Walk away," he said. They did. Not because Selim was the biggest, because something in his stillness told them the cost wasn't worth it. That was the first day Driven looked at him differently. It didn't stop there. Through every pack conflict, every political negotiation, every moment Driven's confidence cracked under pressure, Selim was the one who steadied him. He studied territory maps while Driven slept. He identified weak alliances before they became threats. He structured Iron Crescent's expansion across the Pacific Northwest with the kind of patience that never got photographed or credited. Everyone saw Driven as the empire. Nobody asked who built the foundation. There were moments, small ones, when Selim caught Driven watching him in a way that went beyond strategy. A glance that lasted 1 second too long. A hand that rested on his shoulder before slowly pulling back. A conversation once at 2 in the morning after a brutal pack council meeting, where Driven said quietly, "I don't know what I'd do without you here." Selim had held onto that sentence for years. He shouldn't have. Because 2 months before Soren Vale ever appeared, a private conversation took place inside a soundproofed room on the 32nd floor of Iron Crescent's Seattle Tower. 3 senior pack leaders. Low voices. One name spoken with something close to dread. Selim's name. He can never stand beside Driven officially. The political consequences alone. Handle it. Selim knew nothing about that conversation, but he was about to feel every single consequence of it. The morning after the announcement, Selim's phone was quiet. Not normal quiet, dead quiet. In 21 years, that phone had never once gone silent before 7 in the morning. Lieutenants called. Coordinators checked in. Driven himself had texted before sunrise at least 4 times a week since they were teenagers. Nothing. Selim sat at his kitchen table and watched the screen for 11 minutes. Then he stood up, dressed, and went to work like nothing had happened. That was when it started. The meeting rooms he walked into suddenly had less space at the table. Not obviously, just one chair shifted, one seat already occupied, one coordinator who forgot to copy him on the updated agenda. Small things, deliberate things, the kind of exclusion that never leaves fingerprints. Soren Vale moved through Iron Crescent headquarters like he'd already been there for years. Effortless. Smiling. Always at Driven's right side. Always in the frame of every photo. Always whispering something just before major decisions got announced. Driven didn't notice what was happening to Selim, or he noticed and chose not to look directly at it. Either way, the result was the same. One Tuesday evening, Selim stayed late reviewing a logistics report. He stepped into the east corridor and heard Soren's voice, low and very controlled, drifting through a partially open office door. The Portland route won't be an issue by Thursday. A pause. Then a different voice, one Selim didn't recognize. And the accounts? Already moved. Selim stopped walking. His hand went still against the corridor wall. He stood there for exactly 4 seconds, memorizing every word. Then he kept moving. He didn't run. He didn't call anyone. He walked back to his office, sat down, and opened the PAC's Central Financial Archive. The most recent quarterly report was gone. Not misfiled. Gone. The pup arrived on a Wednesday morning with no warning and no escort. He was maybe 10 years old. Small for his age. Wearing a backpack that was clearly too big for his frame. Clutching the straps with both hands like the bag contained something that might break if he moved wrong. The front desk called Selim directly because the boy refused to speak to anyone else. He said he had something to deliver. He said it was only for Selim Varelli. Selim came downstairs and found the child standing in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by staff who didn't quite know what to do with him. "You're him?" the boy asked. "I'm him," Selim said. The boy reached into the backpack and pulled out an envelope. Old paper. The kind that yellows at the edges and holds the smell of wherever it's been stored. Inside was a photograph. Black and white, slightly worn at the corners. A woman standing in a courtyard Selim recognized immediately. His mother's home in Portland, taken sometime in the mid-90s based on the light and the angle of the building behind her. She was laughing, and beside her stood a man Selim had never seen before in his life. Tall, dark eyes, a stillness in his posture that felt, somehow, familiar in a way Selim couldn't immediately explain. He brought the photograph upstairs. He showed it to 3 separate senior staff members before he found Elder Aldous Crew in a conference room on the 9th floor. Aldous looked at the photograph for no more than 2 seconds. Then the color left his face completely. He picked up his phone and called 2 other elders without saying a single word to Selim. Within the hour, 4 senior elders were gathered in a locked room. Selim stood outside the closed door and listened to the silence on the other side. The boy, who said his name was Nico, sat in a chair beside him, feet dangling above the floor. "My grandmother said to tell you," Nico said quietly, "that she kept it safe for 22 years. Kept what safe?" Selim asked. Nico looked up at him with very serious eyes. "The truth about your father." The door to the conference room opened. Elder Aldous stood in the frame, older looking than he had 5 minutes ago. "There are records," he said. "Sealed ones. We need to open them now." He paused. "They've been locked for over 20 years. The archive room smelled like old paper and decisions nobody wanted to revisit. For elders, one locked cabinet that required two separate key holders present simultaneously to open. Selim stood against the far wall and watched them work. Nobody spoke. The lock clicked. The files came out slowly, manila folders, sealed envelopes, one thick binder with a name stamped across the front in faded black ink. Blackthorn, Orion. Classified. Sovereign Council. Selim read it from across the room. The name meant nothing to him. Then Elder Aldous said it out loud, and Selim watched every other person in the room go completely rigid. Orion Blackthorn. A pause that lasted too long. Founder of the Sovereign Council. Selim pushed off the wall. Who is that? Nobody answered immediately. Aldous opened the binder and turned it toward him. A photograph. Formal. Official. The same man from his mother's photograph. Different year. Different setting. Surrounded by pack leaders from across North America, some of whom Selim recognized from portraits hanging in Iron Crescent's own halls. Before your time, Aldous said carefully. Before most of ours. He united over 200 packs during a period when wolf territories were on the edge of full collapse. He built the Sovereign Council from nothing, made alliances that still hold today, ended 3 separate pack wars without a single battle. He stopped. Then he disappeared. Disappeared, Selim repeated. 22 years ago. The math hit him before the words did. 22 years ago. His mother had been pregnant with him 22 years ago. The DNA confirmation is in the second envelope, one of the other elders said quietly. Selim didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. Something in his body already understood. That strange recognition he'd felt looking at the photograph, that familiar stillness in the man's posture, the way Selim himself moved through conflict with a calm that had always confused people around him. It wasn't a learned behavior. It was inherited. His mother had protected this secret her entire life. She had carried it alone. She had taken it with her. Outside the archive room, somewhere in the building above them, Selim could hear the normal sounds of Iron Crescent headquarters. Phones, footsteps, the low hum of an empire running. An empire he had helped build. For a man who had just replaced him. He looked at Orion Blackthorn's face in that photograph for a long moment. Then his own phone buzzed. A message from a pack coordinator 3 territories away. It read, "Word is spreading. Is it true you're a Blackthorn? Because if it is, we need to talk. Tonight." Selim looked up at Aldous. How many people already know? Aldous's expression gave him the answer before he spoke. Enough, the old man said. Enough that by morning, every rival pack on the continent will be requesting a meeting with you. By 6 the next morning, Selim's door had been knocked on 11 times. He counted. 11 different people. Some he recognized. Some he didn't. Pack coordinators. Territory representatives. One man who introduced himself as a liaison for a council Selim had never even heard of. Operating quietly out of Vancouver for the last decade. All of them wanted the same thing. A meeting. His name. His backing. Selim stood in his doorway for the 3rd visit in a row and studied the man in front of him. Expensive coat, careful smile. The kind of posture that only comes from years of practicing how to look trustworthy. Mr. Varelli. Blackthorn, the man corrected himself quickly. Mr. Blackthorn. Varelli, Selim said. Flat. Final. He closed the door. That matters. Pay attention to that moment. Because what Selim did next told you everything about who he actually was. He didn't make calls. He didn't hold court. He went back to his kitchen table, poured himself coffee, and opened the same financial report he'd been working through for 3 days. The one with the missing quarterly file. the one with numbers that didn't line up no matter which direction he ran them. Power was knocking at his door every 20 minutes. And he was still focused on the one problem nobody else was taking seriously. The Iron Crescent's accounts were being emptied. Slowly, carefully, in amounts small enough to avoid automated alerts. He'd identified 4 separate outgoing transfers over 6 weeks, each routed through a different subsidiary, each landing in accounts registered to shell companies with no traceable ownership. Soren had been in the building for exactly 6 weeks. Selim circled the first transfer date on the printed page. Then his phone buzzed with a message from Nico. The boy had been staying in a guest room 2 floors down since yesterday. Elder Aldous had insisted, said it wasn't safe to send him back until they understood what his grandmother had known and why she'd kept it hidden so long. The message read, "I found something in the hallway. Folder. Someone dropped it. I don't think they meant to." Selim was already standing. He typed back, "Don't touch it. Stay in the room." No response. He called the room's landline. It rang 8 times. No answer. Selim hit the stairwell at a run. Not the elevator. Too slow. Too visible. He took the stairs 2 at a time, phone already dialing Elder Aldous, mind running 3 steps ahead of his body, because if someone had been watching Nico, if someone had figured out what the boy might have seen or what his grandmother had passed along. Aldous picked up on the second ring. "Nico's not answering his room," Selim said. Silence. Then, "I'll send Draylen down." Draylen was Aldous's personal security. Quiet man. Reliable. But Selim was already at the door to Nico's floor. The hallway was empty. Room door slightly open. He pushed it. The room was neat. Bed made. Backpack still sitting in the chair by the window. No Nico. On the floor near the door. A folder thin, cream-colored. No label on the outside. Selim picked it up with 2 fingers and opened it carefully. Inside were printed bank statements. Not Iron Crescent's internal accounts. External. Private. Registered to a holding company called Marin Solutions LLC. The transfer amounts matched exactly what Selim had circled in his own report 20 minutes ago. He flipped to the last page. An email printout, dated 3 weeks ago. 1 line. Confirm the child doesn't know what she told him. The sender address was scrambled. Forwarded through 3 different servers. But the reply, a single word, came from an account registered to a phone number Selim had seen before. He'd seen it because it was saved in Iron Crescent's internal directory. Under Soren Vale. Draylen appeared at the doorway behind him. "He's gone," Draylen said. Camera footage in the east stairwell shows 2 men. They had the boy between them. He wasn't fighting. Looked like they told him it was authorized. Selim closed the folder. His hands were steady. That's what people always got wrong about him. They expected panic. They expected the reaction of someone caught off guard. But Selim Varelli had spent 21 years thinking 3 moves ahead in a world that never once gave him credit for it. He handed the folder to Draylen. "Copy everything in there and get it to Aldous. Physical copies only, nothing digital. And you, I'm going to find Nico." He paused at the doorway. "And tell Dreven nothing. Not yet." Within 36 hours, Selim had built something nobody expected. Not an army. Something quieter than that. And more dangerous. He started with 3 calls. 3 pack leaders who owed him personally, not Iron Crescent, not Dreven. Him. Men and women whose territories he had protected or whose alliances he had quietly saved over the past decade without ever asking for anything in return. Goodwill, it turned out, was a currency that held its value. By hour 12, those 3 had brought in 6 more. By hour 24, independent operatives from 4 different territories were moving. The trail Soren had tried to erase pointed northwest. a warehouse facility outside Tacoma registered under yet another shell company that connected back, eventually, to a rival syndicate that had been pressing against Iron Crescent's western borders for 2 years. Selim stood outside that warehouse in the early morning dark and looked at the building for exactly 4 seconds. Then they went in. Nico was in a back room, scared, unhurt, sitting on a crate with his arms wrapped around his knees. When he saw Selim, he didn't cry. He just exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding his breath since the moment they took him. "I knew you'd come," the boy said. "Always," Selim said. That was the whole conversation. They were out in under 8 minutes. The evidence recovered from that facility hit every PAC network simultaneously before sunrise. Financial records, communications, transaction histories spanning 19 months. Marin Solutions, the shell accounts, the leaked route information that had cost Iron Crescent 3 operations over the past quarter. All of it tied to one name, Soren Vale, and tied, through Soren, to a rival syndicate that had been using him as an access point into Iron Crescent's most sensitive operations since before he and Driven had even met. This wasn't heartbreak. This was espionage. Driven received the full report at 7 in the morning. Selim was told he read it 3 times without speaking. Then he asked one question. "Where is Selim right now?" Nobody answered him immediately, because Selim wasn't waiting around to be found. Driven came to him. No security, no advance notice, just a knock on Selim's office door at 9 in the morning, and when Selim opened it, there he was, the alpha boss of the most powerful PAC syndicate in the Pacific Northwest, standing in a hallway, looking like someone had taken everything he thought he knew and turned it completely upside down. He looked older than he had 3 days ago. "Come in," Selim said. Not warmly, not coldly, just words. Driven sat down. He didn't speak immediately. He looked at his hands for a moment, then at the window, then finally at Selim. "Soren's in custody," he said. "I know." The senior leadership team, Harmon, Vec, and Briggs, they knew about us. What they did 2 years ago, those conversations. "I know that too," Selim said. Driven went quiet. Pause on this. Because what Driven was realizing in that moment wasn't just that he'd been manipulated. He was realizing that Selim, the person he had publicly replaced in front of every major PAC leader on the continent, had likely suspected it for longer than he let on, and had never once used it as a weapon. "I abandoned you," Driven said, "and you still went and saved a child and brought down a 2-year operation." "I didn't do it for you," Selim said. Quiet. Honest. "I did it because Nico was scared and it was the right thing to do." Driven's jaw tightened. "I need you to know that I... Dri." Selim's voice was even. "Stop." He leaned forward slightly. "I know what you're about to say, and I believe you mean it. But meaning something and earning something back are 2 completely different things. You understand that?" Driven nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Selim sat back. "Changes," he said. "Real ones. Not announcements. Not press statements. Structural changes. Young Omegas with actual authority in this PAC. No more political arrangements that treat people like chess pieces. Leadership that answers for itself." A long pause. "And Nico gets a permanent placement, with people who will actually protect him." Driven didn't hesitate. "Done," he said. Selim studied him for a moment. "I still care about you," he said finally. That didn't disappear. But caring about someone and trusting them completely, those are not the same thing anymore. You need to understand that we're starting from the beginning, if we start at all. Driven looked at him with something raw and unguarded in his expression. "I'll take starting from the beginning," he said. over not starting at all. Selim said nothing, but he didn't look away either. 3 months later, the Iron Crescent Pact looked different. Not on the surface, the buildings were the same, the territories unchanged, the empire still running. But the interior structure had been rebuilt from the floor up. Harmon, Vec, and Briggs were removed from leadership positions and referred to the Sovereign Council's oversight body for formal review. 6 young Omega leaders were appointed to positions that had never before been open to them. Pact decisions required broader approval now. No single alpha voice could override the table. Nico found a home. A couple named Deshawn and Malik Fontaine. Both former Pact coordinators, both steady and warm in the way the boy needed, had asked about placement the same week the story broke publicly. Within 6 weeks, the paperwork was done. Nico had his own room, a dog named Biscuit, and a school he actually liked. He sent Selim a drawing every few weeks. Crayon. Slightly crooked. Always a wolf somewhere in it. Selim kept every one. Driven was earning things back. Slowly. Without rushing it. He showed up. Not with grand gestures, but with consistent, quiet effort. Corrected decision here. Public acknowledgement there. Months of behavior that matched the words he'd said in that office. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a door that hadn't closed. Selim, for his part, had started something nobody expected. A foundation. Small, operating out of a Portland office with 6 staff members. Focused entirely on Omega leadership development, education, legal protection, financial independence. The kind of infrastructure that, if it had existed when he was young, might have changed everything for a lot of people. He was good at building things. He always had been. On a Thursday evening in late October, Selim was alone in the Portland office. Everyone else had gone home, working through a grant proposal when the front desk buzzer rang. Courier. He went downstairs himself. The package was small, wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. Sealed with black wax pressed into the shape of a crescent. Not Iron Crescent's symbol. Older than that. He opened it at his desk. Inside was a single object. A coin, heavy and dark, engraved on both sides with symbols he didn't immediately recognize. Underneath the coin, a folded note. The paper was thick. The handwriting deliberate and clear, the kind someone practices for years until it becomes permanent. 6 words. Only 6. It's time we finally meet. No signature. Just an insignia at the bottom of the page. Selim had seen that insignia once before. Stamped on the cover of a sealed binder in an archive room, on a night that had changed everything he thought he knew about himself. Blackthorn. He set the note down on his desk. Looked at it for a long moment. Outside, the Portland night was quiet. October wind against the windows. The city doing what cities do, moving, indifferent, constant. Orion Blackthorn. The man who had built the Sovereign Council from nothing. The man who had united 200 packs and then vanished. The man who was supposed to be dead. Was not dead. And wanted to meet his son. Selim picked up the coin. Turned it over once in his hand. Then he reached for his phone. If Orion Blackthorn had stayed hidden for 22 years. The reason wasn't simple. Men like that don't disappear without purpose. They don't resurface without a plan. And they don't reach out to a son they've never met unless something significant is already in motion. The question wasn't whether Selim would respond. The question was what he was walking into, and whether this time he'd be walking in alone. That story, the one that comes next, changes everything all over again. If the story moved you, if you felt every moment of what Selim carried and what he built from the wreckage, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your words inspire more people than you know. And if you want to be there when the next chapter of this world begins, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every new story on this channel is built to move you, challenge you, and remind you of what people are truly capable of. Don't miss what's coming.